They've been carrying something inside you for some time now, a feeling they struggle to put into words. It's not a physical sensation, not your typical stress, not the usual anxiety either. It is a quiet heaviness in your chest, an unexplainable weariness that has nothing to do with physical exhaustion. This feeling, it's the consequence of compromising too often, of lowering your head so many times that standing tall feels foreign now. The most troubling part, they accepted this as your normal state. Society programmed you to absorb, to tolerate, to remain quiet. They promised that goodness, patience, and understanding would eventually be rewarded. This was never true. What actually happened is that you transformed into an emotional container for everything others couldn't to process themselves. You became the perfect target for damaging behaviors that gradually made you question your own value. Now, when something doesn't sit right with you caught wondering, is this reaction justified, or am I just overreacting? Let me be clear. It's not oversensitivity. It's your intuition. Your mind desperately signaling for attention. Carl Jung recognized this pattern long before others. He spent his career exploring the hidden corners of human psychology. His discoveries were unsettling. Our deepest suffering rarely comes from major traumatic events, but from what we permit in our daily lives, the subtle toxins, the overlooked gestures, the normalized mistreatment, the boundaries we fail to establish. Jung realized that whatever you don't address continues to live within you, and what remains unaddressed inside, it destroys you from within. This message I send to designed for comfort or reassurance. It exists to shake you awake, to show you, with unfiltered honesty, 7 behaviors that Jung identified as completely unacceptable. Not because they violate some moral code, but because they directly threaten who you are at your core. They endanger your sense of self, your wholeness, your psychological well-being. Think of them as invisible destroyers, operating in silence, working from the inside out. Until suddenly, one day, your reflection becomes unrecognizable. But understand this warning. These behaviors don't announce themselves clearly. They don't arrive with warning signs or loud alarms. They come disguised. They masquerade as affection, as connection, as protective care, as innocent jokes. And if you're not vigilant, you welcome them in without question. When you let these behaviors in once, they come back again and again. Each time they return, a piece of you fades away. That's the real reason you rereading this, not because you were just curious, not for simple entertainment. You here because something deep inside is telling you, enough is enough. That you can keep pushing these feelings down. That you need to finally name what has been weighing on you. That it's time to stop permitting certain treatments. This isn't just about what others do to you. It's about your actions too. Because some of these harmful patterns, you use them yourself. And that is exactly why they cut so deep. You don't just receive this pain. You pass it along. Not because you're a bad person, but because nobody ever showed you how to recognize these patterns. Nobody ever told you that these behaviors are also forms of violence. That they disconnect you from your authentic self. But today, things change. Today, one behavior at a time, you learn what Jung was trying to warn humanity about. After finishing this message, you see certain people differently, including yourself. Yes, this realization will hurt, but it will also release you. Are you prepared? Because once you begin this journey, there is no turning back. Things appear minor until they break you down completely. It often begins with a simple gesture, a vague comment, or advice you never asked for. Something that seems innocent enough. But when it happens repeatedly, when you let it slide, it becomes your new normal. That is when you lose yourself. You become what others have quietly shaped while you believed you were making your own choices. Carl Jung cautioned us about this quiet enemy, hidden emotional control. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't come with visible restraints. It arrives with gentleness, with statements masked as genuine concern. I'm only telling you this because I care. If you truly loved me, you would do this. I don't get why you were so affected by this. Then your doubts begin. First, you question the circumstances, then your own perception of events. Finally, you question your very self. Because skilled manipulators don't need to force you, they just need you to start doubting yourself. This isn't to true love. This ISN to real friendship. It is domination wearing affection. Yes, face. And what makes it most dangerous is that it often comes from people you deeply care about. This makes it more toxic because you mistake surrender for loyalty. Jung explained this with brutal clarity. People will go to extraordinary lengths, no matter how irrational, to avoid confronting their own inner selves. And what better way to avoid self-reflection than by reshaping someone else's identity? This manipulation thrives on your silence, on your misinterpreted upbringing, on your fear of losing relationships. But what you were actually losing is yourself. And once they subdued you enough, when they know you won, to fight back, that your resistance has weakened, they cross another boundary. Not satisfied with molding your thoughts, they begin to twist your image in others' eyes. They do this in the most cowardly way possible, through so-called humor, because when control alone no longer satisfies, the next phase begins. More painful, more public, more twisted, humiliation disguised as jokes. It is not a straightforward insult. It is a casual remark, a smiling mockery, a statement presented as humor but carrying a sharp edge. Everyone laughs except you, and you force yourself to laugh too, knowing that if you don't, you'll be labeled as the killjoy, the outcast, the one without humor. The trap is perfectly set. If you show upset, you become the problem. If you remain silent, you allow it to continue. Meanwhile, each joke drives another splinter into your self-worth. Jung understood that our unconscious mind doesn't do separate jokes from reality. Whatever gets repeated becomes embedded within us. This is why making fun of someone, even when it seems harmless, is actually a form of hidden violence. It's a technique for positioning you beneath others, diminishing your worth, and marking you as the group's vulnerable member. The most troubling truth? The people who most frequently engage in this subtle mockery are often deeply insecure themselves. They transform laughter into a weapon because they are terrified of confronting their own inner emptiness. They target others because something inside whispers they aren't enough. But remember, you didn't enter this world to be the dumping ground for others' unprocessed emotional baggage. You have no obligation to serve as their emotional target practice. And if you permit this treatment, if you unintentionally accept it as normal, you unlock the door to something even more dangerous. Because once someone discovers they can mock you without consequences, they advance to something more subtle, more psychologically damaging, and far more erosive. They begin planting seeds of doubt about your very perception of reality. Now we enter the shadowy realm of gaslighting. It's that moment when someone flatly denies what they said, tells you reimagining things, or dismisses your emotional responses. That conversation never happened. You blowing this way out of proportion. Why do you always turn everything into such a big deal? The most damaging aspect of gaslighting ISN, what they say to your face. It's what begins happening within your own mind. Because your brain, as a survival mechanism, starts adapting to their falsehoods. Jung described this as a form of self-betrayal, the precise moment when you begin mistrusting your own perceptions, and when you question your feelings, your memories, your intuitions. You become completely disoriented. You become captive to someone else's narrative, a mind that manipulates yours, doing so without your awareness. Gaslighting operates like an invisible war. There is no yelling, no physical aggression, just a thick mental fog settling inside you until eventually you can no longer distinguish if the problem lies with you or with everything you tolerating. Here, it's the most disturbing part. Once they successfully installed this confusion within you, once reality becomes blurry, they execute something even more twisted. They weaponize your vulnerability against you. This is the fourth harmful behavior, consistent emotional invalidation. You share something that causes you pain, and they dismiss it. You express your feelings, and they trivialize them. You're always harping on about the same issue. It's really not that serious. You just making this more complicated than it needs to be. Every time someone invalidates your emotional experience, what they are actually communicating is that your feelings are inconvenient, bothersome, or excessive, that you should feel less intensely, be more reserved, cause fewer ripples. Gradually, you learn to internalize everything, to withhold expression, to avoid being difficult. You become a diminished version of yourself, someone living to prevent others from feeling uncomfortable. Does this sound familiar to your experience? Jung observed that repressed emotions don't simply vanish. They decay inside us. They resurface later as anxiety, sleeplessness, unexpected rage, or inexplicable melancholy. They don't disappear. They transform. And when this transformation occurs, it pulls you further from your authentic self. But the emotional damage doesn't end there. Once you've been manipulated, mocked, confused, and invalidated, the most chilling blow follows. The most calculated, the most devastating. Silent contempt. That particular expression, that specific look, that intentional absence, the withheld response, the surgical precision with which they ignore your presence. They don't raise their voice at you or verbally abuse you. They simply act as if you don't exist. Yet there you are, present, internally screaming, fully aware they punishing you with their silence, that each passing minute without acknowledgement creates another wound in your fundamental need for human connection. This is where many people finally break, because contempt requires no explanation. It simply drags you down, makes you feel invisible and insignificant, as if your very existence hinges on a response that never arrives. If they made it to this point, if they tolerated all of this without breaking down, you fundamentally altered. Your ability to trust has eroded. Your willingness to speak up has diminished. Your emotional landscape has completely shifted. Can you see where this path leads? Jung cautioned us, what you refuse to acknowledge controls you. What you consciously accept has the power to change you. And everything you've been silently permitting is exactly what is keeping you trapped. But we haven't covered everything yet. 2 more behaviors remain to discuss. These are the most dangerous ones, the most subtle, the ones that, if not detected early enough, want to just destroy you. They'll turn you into someone who inflicts the same damage on others. Do you want to proceed further? Because what follows is even more disturbing. Up until now, we discussed how others affect you, how they shape, twist, and control your perception of reality. But what comes next, ISN? To just an attack against your well-being. It's like an infection that, left unnoticed, will spread into your hands, your choices, your entire worldview. The next behavior doesn't merely hurt you, it transforms who you are. The glorification of sacrifice as a virtue. This is the 6th destructive pattern, and likely the most applauded one. The most cleverly disguised, the most celebrated by society. Since childhood, they've been taught that yielding to others means loving them, that putting everyone else first is honorable, that sacrificing yourself shows how mature you are. So gradually, you learn to fade into the background, placing yourself last in your own story. But here, that's a painful truth that cuts deeper than rejection. Not everything done in love, its name is healthy. Not everything tolerated for peace actually creates peace. Sometimes what you label as sacrifice is actually submission. It's fear. It's the habit of not fully existing. Jung grasped this concept perfectly. He discussed the self as the authentic center of our psychology. Everything that distances you from that center, everything that suppresses your genuine impulses, desires, and boundaries, fragments you. It splits you. It transforms you into a distorted version of who you once were. Society praises you for this, for being flexible, for avoiding conflict, for constantly being available to everyone. But no one asks, when was it your turn? When did you finally attend to your own needs? Constant sacrifice, ISN, to love. It is self-abandonment. The most devastating aspect is that when this becomes your identity, you lose your true self completely. And what happens when someone loses themselves entirely? When they no longer have a voice, a center, or any boundaries? This leads to the 7th behavior, accepting contempt as the price of belonging. This is rock bottom, the deepest pit. It's when, after enduring so much manipulation, humiliation, confusion, invalidation, silence, and self-neglect, you decide that belonging at any cost feels better than standing alone with your truth. So you resign yourself. You accept crumbs of affection. You tolerate consistent rejection. You justify what can to be justified. And the most heartbreaking part, you convince yourself that you are the problem, that you deserve this treatment, that you can expect anything better. Jung described this condition as a psychological death, a complete disconnection from the self. The moment when a person stops fighting, stops questioning, stops feeling. They merely exist. They adapt to mistreatment because they believe nothing exists beyond it. That contempt is simply the price of not being alone. That being ignored feels better than not being seen at all. But it is not. Listen carefully. Nothing justifies betraying yourself day after day. Yes, loneliness is difficult, but living surrounded by people who drain your spirit, that is truly hell. You weren't put on this earth to beg for acceptance. You were here to fully inhabit yourself, to claim your rightful place in the world without apology, to rebuild yourself after allowing all this damage. And if you read this far, you feel every word resonating. Because each of these behaviors has left its mark on you. Perhaps not all of them, perhaps not constantly, but you recognize what it feels like to look in the mirror and see a stranger. You understand what it's like to remain silent so someone else won and feel offended. You know what it's like to feel diminished in spaces where you should be your complete self. Now you recognize these patterns for what they are. You can no longer claim ignorance. 7 behaviors, 7 toxins, 7 ways you participate in your own destruction by giving permission. Jung didn't document these as instructions. He left them as a caution, like a distant warning call through dense fog. So now that you re-aware, what action will you take? Because here comes the unexpected turn that surprises everyone. Most individuals, even after comprehending everything, will change nothing. They allow return to the same environment. They allow go back to the same relationships. They allow continue the same patterns of betraying themselves. Why does this happen? Because familiarity feels safe. Because remaining numb causes less immediate pain than confronting the emptiness that comes with authenticity. But if they followed along to this point, they absorbed every word, every pause, every dark corner explored, you're not like most people. Something inside you has begun to ignite. You can feel it, to you. That small flame whispering, enough? You may not yet understand how to proceed. You don't have complete answers. But with primal certainty that something within you is struggling to break free. This is where the genuine work begins. It is not about accusing others. It is not about becoming judgmental or playing the perpetual victim. It is about observing, examining with clarity, being completely truthful with yourself. Where have you accepted the unacceptable? Who have you excused too frequently? Which parts of yourself have you sacrificed to maintain acceptance? This ISN to motivational content. It's an unfiltered reflection. And if your image disturbs you, it is not because the mirror is defective. It is because you haven't been brave enough to face your authentic self. And listen carefully. If you choose transformation, if you decide to eliminate these behaviors, prepare to experience loss. People will leave, relationships will end, daily patterns will change. But make no mistake, you won't be losing anything that wasn't already draining your life force. Each loss will be a cleansing. What remains afterward will be genuine, truly yours, unshakable. What no one can destroy without your explicit permission. Carl Jung didn't write to make people comfortable. He wrote to wake them up. And that is what has happened to you today. You opened your eyes. Now done to shut them again. Done to pretend you didn't witness what was revealed. Done to betray yourself at this crucial moment. Because there is something rarely discussed. But from this moment forward, you understand. True power ISN to making the world respect you. It is no longer needing that respect to feel whole. Tag someone who needs to hear this message, or simply write, "Thank you, Jung," if this video helped you name what they've been feeling. If you found this video useful, please like it and subscribe to the channel. There are more videos on this channel that will help you become a better version of yourself.